with the mason, on any angle walls, such as, let's say, a bay window where you have a 45-degree angle on a wall, one thing I want you to tell the mason to do is on any angle corners, you want them to have a brick saw out there and you want them to cut those angles. I do not want to see the mason out there chipping brick with their brick trowel, trying to get a nice, corner on that brick. So any angle cuts on a brick, I do not want them to use their trowel to cut it, because they waste a boatload of brick trying to get one that fits just right. I want them to have a brick saw out there, and they will cut any angles using the brick saw, not their hand trowel. And it gives you a lot nicer, neater job, and you don't have them wasting all this brick. The mason can build all your arches, can build all your columns, can do any brick floors, any walls. They can build walls out of concrete block, for example, that you'll cover with brick or stucco. The mason can build coins on the corners. If you've got these precast or limestone coins, they can install those. You can see it 24/7 what I mean by this. The mason will install any foundation vents, any water tables, and they will charge you normally extra for much of this stuff. Now, one thing I've been amazed with over the recent years is I know in the Atlanta area, when we had the influx of the Hispanic community, which became saved us in the construction industry, because it was getting to where the American workers it was hard to get them to do some of this work, and they wanted top pay, and all they did was just complain. And believe me, I want to control the immigration. I don't understand why this can't be controlled, why they can't regulate it. But unfortunately, we need to regulate it, but we need these individuals in the construction industry because they are great. And had they not been around, the home prices I know in Metro Atlanta would have gone out of sight, because material prices did go out of sight. But because of the Hispanic community, they really kept our prices down. I know in brickwork, a real nice arch, it got to where just the labor to do a nice arch above a window could cost as much as, $150 to $200 for one arch, labor only. With the Hispanic community, a lot of those masons, they would do all the brickwork and they would include all the arches and everything in their price and not charge extra. I mean, it was amazing. Not to mention they did do beautiful work. So they have been very, very vital to the construction industry, and I just pray it can all be worked out to where we do keep our borders safe and we allow these individuals to keep working in this industry. Your mason is who we also hired to clean the brick. They will normally charge you so much per thousand to clean it. A lot of times they use what is called muriatic acid to clean brick. However, if you're getting into your real expensive wood mold brick, I want you to read the instructions on how those bricks should be cleaned, and you need to follow those instructions. Because in a lot of your expensive wood mold brick, they'll tell you you must clean them by hand. Now, there's no problem with that as long as you know it. And so if you get out there and you've got an expensive wood mold brick and they use a pressure wash and muriatic acid, they could change the color, and that would be a major screw up. So every bundle of brick will have instructions on how they should be cleaned, and you need to clean them per those instructions. Now, one product you'll see at 24/7 that is an excellent product for cleaning brick and not damaging the color of the brick is a product called Sure Clean. And you can see that at 24/7. And you want to clean the brick as soon as possible. The longer you let that residue sit on the brick, the harder it's going to get to clean. So the mason will either kind of clean the brick as they go, or as soon as they finish the brickwork, they'll jump right in there and clean it. And you will normally deal with a mason to do the brick cleaning, and you will pay them extra to do this. On your stonework, the mason you deal with on the stonework, sometimes, a lot of times they're labor, you furnish all the material, but many times your stonemasons are subcontractors. They furnish the labor and material. If you're using the heavy stone that must sit on a brick ledge or a footing, you will think about it a lot of times just like brick. They'll have wall ties that tie it to the wall. You'll need to have flashing at the base of the wall. You'll need to have weep holes or weep ropes so the water can get out from behind the rock. But on a lot of your rock, the people will use thinner rock, and by using the thinner rock, they're able to attach it to the wall, kind of like ceramic tile. You'll put up a piece of wire lath, and on top of that wire lath, they'll put cement, and then they will just basically stick the stone to the cement on your thin stone. Now, even though you're using thin stone, it's still pretty heavy, but it's not heavy enough that you just can't stick it to the wall. As I mentioned in the cost cutting area, you may want to really look into your man-made stones, because the man-made stones, they have really improved the look of the stone. In many ways, I think some of the man-made stone looks better than the real stuff. It's normally significantly cheaper than real stone, primarily because you have little or no waste with the man-made stone. And the man-made stone comes in a kind of a heavy grade that makes it even feel exactly like real stone. But they also make a lighter weight grade that you can use in places like on a chimney or on the gable of a home where part of the stone is sitting on part of the roofing. Because if you're going to have real heavy stone and or brick up on a chimney or like on a gable, and it's going to be sitting on part of the roof, you have got to reinforce that area to hold that brick or stone. You just can't put brick or stone right up there and think the wood framing of the home is going to adequately support it. Now, if it's a small amount, it may work out just fine. But if it's a large amount, you may need to get a structural engineer to show you how you can support that brick or stone that's sitting on top of the roof. But if you go to the lighter man-made stone, that's no issue at all. They can just stick it right to the wall sheathing, and it gives you the brick look without having that additional weight up there. And or they can stick it to the chimney chase. Okay, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the stucco. Now on the stucco, instead of using real stucco, we call hard coat stucco. You could use a product that looks more real than real stucco that I simply call synthetic stucco. Some people refer to it as EIFS, which I'm just drawing a blank on exactly. Energy, insulation, surface material. I can't remember exactly what it. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the stucco. Now on the stucco, instead of using real stucco, we call hard coat stucco, you could use a product that looks more real than real stucco. I simply call it synthetic stucco. Some people refer to it as EIFS, E-I-F-S, which stands for Exterior Insulation Stuccos. You're going to be dealing with a subcontractor. They may put a layer of your 30-pound felt on top of the wall, and then on top of that, they'll put a layer of wire lath. On top of that wire lath, they'll put a layer of Portland cement we call the scratch coat. After that sets up, they'll come back and on top of that, put the brown coat. And then on top of that, they'll put your stucco color or texture. On the synthetic stucco, they put it on 1, 2, or more inches of, I'll call it styrofoam. Now, styrofoam is a brand name. If Owens Corning didn't make it, they'd rather you not call it styrofoam. It's extruded polystyrene, but we'll simply call it styrofoam. And they will glue this styrofoam to the sheathing. And then on top of this styrofoam, and by the way, they can cut any pattern you desire in this styrofoam. And then on top of this styrofoam, they put what is called the glass coat. And then on top of this glass coat, they put what is called the finish coat. The beauty of synthetic stucco, because they put it on 1 to 2 inches of styrofoam, it is very, very energy efficient. One of the more energy efficient veneers you can put on a home, whereas brick has very little energy efficiency. Another good part about your synthetic stucco is that they have a rainbow of colors that you can choose for it. Whereas on real stucco, you should paint it with a good masonry type paint. But your stucco subcontractor, and by the way, you normally deal with subcontractors for both of these, they'll have color selections that they can put on the finish color for your hard coat stucco. Another good part about synthetic stucco is, see, wood homes, wood framing expands and contracts, expands and contracts. I don't care what you do to hard coat stucco, you are going to over time see cracks in it. You're not going to see cracks in the synthetic stucco. Now, one negative with synthetic stucco is that it could cost you as much as brick. And depending on the number of little doodads you have on your home, it could cost you more than brick. Whereas your hard coat stucco is normally cheaper than brick. We have used synthetic stucco in commercial work forever. We've used synthetic stucco in residential work half of forever. And there's some real quality brands out there, one of the most well-known brands being Dryvit. Now, I believe your synthetic stucco, your better brands, I believe they were developed in Europe. I think Dryvit was developed in Germany. Now, I'm sure there's some brands out there that are not that good. Dryvit is not one of them. Many of you are aware of some of the negative hype with stucco homes. I know in the Atlanta area, stucco homes, the owners have had to take a big discount to get rid of stucco homes. Some relocation companies would not fool with a stucco home. And let me tell you what the problem is. Now, this is my opinion for what it's worth. You can take this and $5 and get a cup of coffee. The problem is true of every veneer, brick, siding, and stucco. And that is in corners, around doors, around windows. Water will seep in behind these areas if they're not correctly flashed. And over time, you'll get water leaking behind the wall. Now, most veneers will tend to breathe. So the water that gets in behind the wall over time will tend to evaporate. Now, you could still wind up with a rotting problem over time, but it could take quite a bit of time for that to happen. The problem with your synthetic stucco is when water gets behind the wall, the styrofoam acts like an insulator, and the water does not evaporate out too quickly. So not only could you have a rotting problem, but it could turn into an acute mold and mildew problem. And that's the big problem, mold and mildew. This is something that can be tested on an existing home. This is something that can be repaired and fixed. And I have no real problem with it. But because I'm in the building business to earn a profit, and so many consumers are still so scared spitless with stucco problems, unfortunately, I've had to steer clear of stucco until all these fears. When you go into these multi-million-dollar homes where you see them stucco in the home, what you're going to see them doing there is the old European way of stuccoing, where they will brick the home or concrete block the home, and they cover the brick or block with stucco. Now, that's the old European way of doing it. That's not what I'm talking about here, and this is very expensive. If you're going to have a stucco veneer, or even if only part of the home is going to have a stucco veneer, if you recall, we talked about the wall sheathing, and I recommended OSB board for wall sheathing. Where you are going to have stucco, instead of using the OSB board, I recommend you use a product we call DenShield. And you can see information about this at 24/7. That DenShield gives you an excellent surface to install stucco. And let me correct this. I'm talking about using synthetic stucco. Remember, I told you that you will glue the styrofoam to the sheathing? Well, the best job in the world, and the one that holds up the best, is you will glue the styrofoam to DenShield wall sheathing. And you can see specifically what it's called at 24/7. Your hard coat stucco, I personally would like to put that on top of the OSB board. Now, they will cover the OSB board with like 15 or 30 pound felt, but I like to put the hard coat on OSB, but the synthetic stucco I'll put on the DenShield wall sheathing. Does a great job. And the DenShield will prevent moisture from seeping into your home. One last thing I want to mention about the stucco is that if you've got any decorative items going on in your home, like what we call keys or coins, if you're not going to purchase like a limestone key or coin, which is very expensive, and you can see what I mean by these things at 24/7, the stucco subcontractor can build these out of stucco. They can build it out of a real stucco, hard coat stucco, or they can build it out of synthetic stucco. And they can build these decorative items right on top of your brick. So you'll complete all your brickwork, and then your stucco sub will come in, and on top of the brick, they can build what looks like a limestone arch or a coin or a key, and they can do this out of stucco. And it's a lot cheaper than, the real items in limestone. After they finish all this masonry work, especially the brick, you want to get a crew in there to clean the job site. Now, the mason will pile up, the brick bats and stuff like this, but don't expect them to necessarily, you might get them to haul them and throw them into the container that you got on the job site, but they're not going to rake everything clean and just get all this stuff cleaned up. There are crews out there, there are companies out there, and all they do is clean construction sites for builders. And I just really enjoy working with these companies, because when there's a lot of debris or something, or the home needs cleaning out for one reason or another, you'll try and get as many subs to do this cleaning as much as possible, but there's going to be stuff that still will accumulate over time. One thing is, when they brick a home, you've got all these brick bats sitting around, and just, they'll be a problem for you later. And these companies will come in, and they usually have a small dump truck, and they will pick up every piece of brick on the job site, every piece of debris. They will just clean it pristine, and it makes life so much easier, and you don't have all this junk around when you're continuing to do work, and it won't come back to haunt you later. So what you want to do after they finish all this brickwork, masonry work, get one of these crews in there, and they will just clean the job site real good and haul this trash off. And that saves you there, because you're not putting all this in your container, which you're going to have to pay for when you dump it. And while I'm mentioning this, in the normal course of construction, you're going to be dumping your container numerous times before this home is completely finished. Don't think you're going to get by with one load. No, there'll be numerous times during construction it'll be full. You'll haul it, dump it, and bring it back empty. and be constantly doing this during the construction of the home. When they complete all this masonry work, you want to get your painter out there. Now, remember, everything should be primed. All the wood on the home should be primed. Now you want to get your painter out there, and they're going to caulk and putty, and they're going to paint all your cornice, all your windows, any of your wood on your exterior. They're going to take care of this now. And your painter is a subcontractor. And on the paint, we've already been talking about the painter doing different things on the home. Your painter kind of lives with you during the construction of your home. They become part of your family. They borrow money from you. And most painters I know will highly, highly recommend whichever paint they have an open account with as being the best paint ever made. Well, my personal choice is Benjamin Moore. I think that's a great paint, but Benjamin Moore is an expensive paint. I put a lot of stock in Consumer Reports, and Consumer Reports rated the Home Depot and Walmart brand like number 1, number 2. And so that says a lot about their paint. But whichever paint you go with, I want you to understand that just every manufacturer has a good, better, and best paint. I don't want you to deal with just the good. That's usually what the builders deal with. I would prefer you to use the best, but if that's a little outside your pocketbook, then at least use the better. So I would use better before I would use good. I don't think you're going to be real happy with good. And every manufacturer has good, better, and best. But talk with the manufacturer, and you can, if you need to, you can go online, go directly to the manufacturer. You can send them an email or a fax. Tell them what part of the country you're building in. Tell them you got exterior, interior, you've got drywall, doors, cabinets, whatever. Would they please recommend the type of caulking, primer, and paint they recommend you use in all these areas? And they can send you an email, or if you talk with the local manager of the paint store, they can write all this stuff down for you. And I don't care if your painter's been painting 30 years, that's what they've got to use. Because I've seen some manufacturers recommend an oil-based paint where another manufacturer would recommend a latex. And because oil-based paint, oil is a petroleum product, I'm noticing that more and more manufacturers, it looks like they're going to be moving away from an oil-based paint, and they're able to create latex paint that, holds up under, water and cleaning and extreme conditions. But you want to know what the manufacturer recommends. And by doing what the manufacturer recommends, see, your paint has an implied warranty. If you do what they say and you have a problem, they'll pay to fix it. I had this happen on one room in one home. Their product didn't hold up the way they said, and they paid to fix it and repair it. And make sure your painter doesn't match it up with another brand. You specify what you want, and they've got to use that brand. And you can dictate to your painter, even though the painter's a subcontractor, you can specify to the painter specifically what brand and what quality you want. But the painter will go ahead and caulk and putty and paint all the exterior of the home that's requiring painting. About the same time, you can have your grader back out there to do the final backfill. On the final backfill, you can see in the some sketches at 24/7, ideally the dirt, you want to keep it 8 inches away from any wood portion of the home. Sometimes this would be kind of tough to do, but you don't want the dirt going up on the wood. As I mentioned with the weep holes, you don't want the backfill to cover up any of your weep holes if you installed them where they should be installed. Now, if you kind of messed up, then you may cover up some of your weep holes. And hopefully that's not the case. Even though you're going to have gutters, walk around the home, and the main thing you want is the water to run away from your home. A lot of basements leak today because this burned up ground would settle and the water run directly toward the home instead of away from it. And you don't want the water just to run away from your home and just puddle up. It needs to run clear off your land. And this is when you can't play the game, well, I think that's okay. You better know where the water is going. So this tractor, they'll cut these swales and divert any water coming from your neighbor's land. They'll divert it away from your home onto your other neighbor's land. And then they got to worry about the problem. So picture all the water when it falls off the roof and hits the ground. It needs to run away from your home and clear off your property. And you better know that's what it's doing, not think it's doing that. After they do the final backfill, you can then go in and take some hay bales and spread this hay bale or straw around the base of the home to minimize any mud splashing up on your brick, stone, or stucco. If you have any excess dirt, I'm not talking about your topsoil, excess fill dirt, now's a good time to get rid of this, because you should have gotten all the dirt that you need. So any excess that you have, go ahead and get rid of it. Hopefully you'll find somebody that will take it off your hands for free so you don't have to pay to get rid of it. And understand, I may not spread the topsoil at this point. Now, sometimes I need to get the topsoil out of the way, but if that's not the case, I'll keep the topsoil over to one side and I'll let the landscaper put the topsoil down. If you have a septic tank, I wait until now to do the septic tank. Now, some people will tell you, no, you should do the septic tank before you do the final backfill. I've run into problems by doing that. And even though they say, well, the septic tank needs to be in undisturbed ground, well, the septic tank sub can dig down through any fill and get down to undisturbed ground to satisfy that requirement. But I found I have less problems by doing the septic tank after the final backfill, because if I do it before the final backfill, sometimes a tractor will run across it and crack the tank, and it just, I just don't know exactly how the grade's going to shape up. And I found I have less problems by waiting until now to install the septic tank. I did mention that in mountainous areas, you may have installed the septic tank back before you even started the construction of the home. But normally you will wait until now. The septic tank needs to be inspected by the county health department before you cover it up. Make sure that inspection has been made and it has passed before you pay the septic tank sub. Draw the location of the septic tank on your foundation survey, so if you need to locate it in the future and pump it out, you'll be able to know exactly where it's located. And think in terms of a truck needing to get back there and access the septic tank, or get near the septic tank and pump it out. Also, this will hopefully prevent you from accidentally building something on top of it, as some people have done. Most utility companies, in fear that you're going to cut their lines, they do not want to run any lines to the home until after the final backfill. So after the final backfill, you'll get your utility companies out there, and they will run the electrical line to the home. They will run the gas line to the home, the cable TV, the phone line. And you want to go ahead after the final backfill and connect your water line from the home to the water meter or the home to the well. And then, of course, make sure that the plumber has connected the sewer line. I've heard of cases where people have moved into the home, got the certificate of occupancy, moved in, and started living there only to find that the sewer line and the water line had never been connected. So make sure the sewer line has been connected to the septic tank and or to the sewer line on the property, the public sewer line. And just so you know, I will wait until after the final backfill to run the water line from the home to the water meter or home to the well, so that they don't accidentally cut the water line when they're doing the final backfill. After the final backfill, you can have your gutter subcontractor out there to go ahead and install the gutters, and I would go ahead and install the gutter downspouts. And before they put the gutters up there, you want to verify the cornice has been at least primed, and preferably it has been primed and painted before they put the gutters up there. I've seen them put the gutters right up and the cornice or the fascia board has never even been primed. As much as I like the galvanized steel gutter because it's so much more durable than the aluminum gutter, the problem with the galvanized steel gutter is you still got to prime and paint it. So most consumers really like the aluminum gutter with baked-on enamel. The problem with the aluminum gutter is that if you're around trees and stuff like this, it's just not as durable and it can bend in real easily, and so people cleaning them out can easily bend them. And that's why I always like the galvanized steel gutter. But with the leaf guards and things that you can put on the gutter now, which I do highly recommend if you are around trees, the aluminum gutter with baked-on enamel, I got to admit, it's nice, and because you don't have to go in there and prime and paint it. And they have enough color selection that you can normally get something that really complements your color scheme on your home. If you're not going to have any underground piping for your gutter downspouts, then I want you to be sure and put a splash block at the bottom of your gutter downspouts. And, I have different landscape architects turning those things different ways. Some want the water just to flow out. Some want to slow the water as it flows out. Whichever way turns you on, turn it that way. Just make sure the water runs away from your home. What I really like, though, is to have underground piping for the gutters downspouts so you're getting the water away from your home. Now, in some areas, you're going to find the city or county mandating that you've got to put underground piping, and you can't even let the water go to the street. And what they require you to do is contain the water on the property. And one of the most well-known ways of doing this is using a product from NDS. You can see this at 24/7. The manufacturer is NDS, and they'll install what is called a flow well. We will normally have the landscaper install the flow well if we're going to use these things. I'm not wild about the flow well, but if you're in an area where they mandate that you contain the water runoff from your gutters, the NDS flow well is not a bad way to go. But I prefer to have piping going from the downspout, taking the rainwater away from the home, preferably all the way to the street, and dumping it in the street or into a stream or something that may be near the property, just getting it away from the home. And on your underground piping, I would highly recommend you not use the standard old 4-inch corrugated black pipe. That corrugated pipe will tend to clog up over time. It catches any kind of debris flowing through the pipe. It can crush in easily, and I just think over time it's just an aggravation. I would prefer that you use a solid pipe. Now, they have a corrugated pipe with a solid sleeve on the inside, which is nice, but it's expensive. You can go with a PVC pipe, a 4-inch PVC pipe, and it doesn't have to be Schedule 40, just a cheaper 4-inch PVC pipe that you can connect for your underground piping for your gutter downspouts. And what I'll do is I'll use that solid PVC piping to get the water away from the home, and then from the end of that solid PVC pipe, I'll put a little flexible connector to connect the end of that PVC up to the gutter. I would like to have the gutter subcontractor to leave that downspout about a foot at least, maybe a foot and a half off the grade or off the level of the ground. So I've got room to run that little connector up to it, and I don't have to worry about anybody in knocking the bottom of that downspout off or damaging the bottom of the downspout. After the final backfill, you can also prepare, form, and finish everything for your dries and walks and miscellaneous concrete that you're going to need. We normally deal many times with the concrete finisher, which is labor, but there are companies out there that we hire as subcontractors. So you just need to look and compare price and see which is going to be best for you. But they're going to get in and form and pour and finish all your dries and walks and these other little items I'm going to mention to you. Many, I dare say most of your driveways out there, they will use 4 inches of concrete. And because I mentioned earlier about using 3,000 pound mix, a lot of people will use 3,000 pound mix, 4 inches of concrete, 3,000 pound mix. What I would recommend you do, though, is spend a little extra money, because it's not that much more money we're talking about, unless you have a driveway that's 1,000 feet long. That would be, different. But especially if you've got heavy trucks coming in, such as even a moving van that's going to move you in, or any kind of heavy vehicles that will come in later if you own like a big Hummer or something. I would recommend you pour at least 5 inches. My preference would be 6 inches of concrete. And you spend a little additional money and go to a 4,000 pound or 4,000 PSI mix. That way you've got a good heavy duty driveway that's going to hold up over time, and even with heavier trucks and stuff coming in and out, and not be cracking up over time that you see a lot of driveways will do. If you're pouring on top of real firm ground, I have no problem just pouring the concrete without any wire mesh in the concrete. If you know that you're pouring on top of fill ground or fill dirt that you had to fill in an area, in that area, I would put some welded wire mesh, that 6x6, 10x10 welded wire mesh in the driveway in an area like that. But if it's on firm, stable ground, it would be good if you had the wire mesh, but I don't do it. And I just save the money doing it that way. And I feel okay about it. My driveways seem to hold up all right. I do want you to put sleeves under the driveway. Think about where you're going to maybe run any wiring for any landscape lighting. Think about where you're going to be running any of your irrigation system, and where you're going to be running any wiring or irrigation systems. I want you to put preferably a 4-inch sleeve. It can be a piece of 4-inch PVC pipe that the electricians use for conduit, or the plumbers use. I prefer the electrician's conduit. But if it's not 4-inch, at least 3-inch, so you can get several pipes through that one sleeve. Mark the location of these sleeves on your site plan, so if you need to locate them in the future when you're installing some of these items, you'll be able to find them. And your concrete finisher is going to install these sleeves where you want them. When they do this concrete, I want you to go ahead and form and pour any pads that you may need for your deck supports, any pads that you'll be putting on top of your T-walls or brackets for a masonry porch or step. And by the way, I failed to mention that when they do the brickwork, they may not do the porches or steps at this time, because you may need to do these concrete pads, or you may want to run the driveway or walkway up to an area before you build your front porches and or steps. So the mason may be required to come back later. You're going to see my recommendations on the size pad you put for your heating and air compressor or heat pump that's going outside, and the information I use on that. And you want to go ahead and, when they're pouring this concrete, do a pad for the heating and air system that sits outside. I'd prefer doing a pad instead of just putting them on those little man-made pads they bring with the units. Those just are kind of rinky-dink to me. I like having a nice concrete pad to put the heating and air system on. And 24/7 will give you some information regarding the size of that pad. When they pour and finish this concrete in these different areas, you want to put on that concrete what we call a broom finish. See, your interior concrete, they put a smooth, slick finish, which is nicer, and it kind of seals the concrete. On your exterior concrete, you put a broom finish so you'll have traction and won't slip off of it when it's wet. However, if you're staining the concrete, you need to get with that subcontractor and find out from them what kind of finish they want on the concrete. And one thing you want to tell your concrete finisher to do, if you tell them this, they'll do it. If you don't tell them, they will not do it, and it should not cost any extra. Tell your concrete finisher to finish the edge of your drives and walks. And if you go to 24/7, you'll see a little edger that the concrete finisher will use, and they run this edger down the edge of your drives and walks while the concrete is still fresh. It not only looks good, but it helps maintain the good look of that driver walk. If they don't finish the edge of that driver walk and you pull that form board off, that square edge will chip and crack off over time and look nasty looking. When they finish the edge, it puts this little rounded edge on your drives and walks, and it looks very nice, and it helps maintain the good look of that driver walk. Another thing I want you to do is tell the concrete finisher to install what we call isolation joints or expansion joints and control joints. Now you can see a graphic at 24/7 to show you how often you should install a control joint and where you normally install an isolation joint. The isolation joint is normally where the driveway meets the garage floor, or where the driveway meets the city sidewalk, or where the driveway may intersect with your walkway. That's an isolation joint or a control joint. And you can buy that control joint material, that isolation joint or expansion joint material, just like we used in the basement, instead of just putting a board there that will rot out over time. And what the control joint is it puts a little groove in the concrete, and what happens, see, your exterior concrete especially does a lot of expanding and contracting, and if you don't control this, it will randomly crack everywhere and look just nasty looking. And what you're going to do is put a little groove in the concrete, and when it cracks, it will normally, not always, but normally it will crack at that groove. That's why they call it a control joint. And if you'll look on that little sketch, you'll notice you should have a control joint at least every 12 to 15 feet in a driveway and every 5 feet in a walkway. And if you tell the concrete finisher to do this, they'll do it. And if you don't tell them, they will not do it, and they should not charge you any extra to do it. And at 24/7, you can see photos and graphics of what I'm talking about and how they install it. And this is one of those items where people walk up and they just say, I don't know what it is, but this drive-in wall looks so nice. It looks very nice. Very nice. Some people, when they pour the concrete, they will stamp a pattern in it to make it look like brick or cobblestone. And I used to tell students, that's not cheap, but it's cheaper than the real thing. Well, over the past couple of years, concrete prices have gone up so much that I want you to look into this, because at this recording, you can actually purchase real pavers, real brick, and install it cheaper than stamping the concrete. So I would rather have the real stuff than a stamped pattern. So you want to check into that and just see the comparison in price, and you may be pleasantly surprised that you can go with the real stuff cheaper than stamping. After they finish the concrete, as part of their price, and you want to make sure this is done before you pay them, they got to strip all the form boards. And when they strip all the form boards, hopefully you still got a container at the job site. If you've had to move the container to make room for the drives and walks, then what they can do is pile all this scrap up in a given location. And one of those companies I told you about that clean up the job site, you can pile all this up. And then when you've got a good pile of debris, you can call these companies out there. They'll pick up all this trash, put it in their dump truck and haul it off. For some of you that have checked out staining concrete, if you go to 24/7 or even the internet and just Google stained concrete, you're going to see what people have done to driveways, and it is just gorgeous. And they'll do that instead of using pavers or stamping concrete. They'll put a color in it, and it just is really a nice look and would be significantly cheaper than using pavers or even stamping the concrete. So if you're going to stain the concrete, you of course need to talk with that individual before you get into this process, so you know exactly what you need to do and what you need to be aware of. If you're going to install pavers, we normally deal with a subcontractor. Go to 24/7 and you will see the information there that is acquired through, I think it's the Brick Association, on the correct way and specifications you need to know for pavers. And you want to follow those specifications if you do any pavers. Now, I personally, even though you can put pavers on top of firm ground, my preference is that you put down at least like a 2-inch layer of concrete, and on top of that concrete, you install your pavers. That's my preference. But if you don't want to spend the money for that concrete, then you can install the pavers on firm ground and just make sure you follow the instructions that you'll get on that information at 24/7. One thing about the pavers that I've noticed is if you have access to granite sand as opposed to just regular mason sand, the granite sand is a little darker in color, and I think it does a lot neater job because you've got to brush sand on top of pavers to kind of fill in the joints to just lock them together and stabilize them. And the granite sand is very fine and does just a nice, neat job if it's available in your area. When you finish your driveway, you want to block it off. My preference would be a concrete driveway will sit up there at least 5 to 7 days before you let any traffic on it, so it gets nice and hard. But even after it sets up, I want to regulate people driving up on the concrete. Yeah, I'd prefer that, they park on the street instead of pulling up on the concrete. But they're going to have to pull up there and unload tools or equipment or supplies or whatever. And you want to regulate this by having either a big piece of cardboard or some tarps or something, painter tarps that you'll spread on the concrete, and they have to put it under their trucks. So if the truck drips any oil, it won't get on your nice, brand new, fresh concrete. So you got to regulate the number of people that come up there. And when they come up, they got to put something underneath their vehicle so they're not dripping oil on your concrete or your pavers. Along about the same time, we'll have a crew out there building any of our wooden decks. Now, some people hire the cornice carpenter to build the decks. Some people will hire the finish carpenter to build the decks. Their crews running around, that's all they do. They build decks. Now, on the decks, if your deck was not designed by a professional, I want you to get the deck book I have recommended at 24/7, and I want you to purchase that book. And that book is going to show you the correct way to construct, support, and build a deck. It's also going to show you how to deal with pressure-treated material or cedar or redwood or even your composite material, no-rot material, which is somewhat expensive. Because I've been on a lot of large decks that I'd hate to have a large party of people on, the way they're constructed. And you hear about these things caving in and people being, hurt and everybody being sued, some people getting killed. So if your deck was not designed by a professional, that book at 24/7 is going to show you how it should be constructed so you don't have to worry about this. At about this same time, if you have shutters that are going to go on the exterior of the home on either side of your windows, you could hire the person building the deck to install the shutters, but whoever you buy the shutters from, especially if you're going to be using, real looking shutters or real shutters, the companies that make those things, they will also install them for you. So you can talk with them about installing them. Sometimes the person that installed your exterior doors and windows, they can come back and they're excellent at installing shutters that go on the exterior of the home. Also at this time, you will have the mason returning to the job to finish any masonry porches and or steps. After you do this, you can have the painter back out there to do any final painting of the exterior, any touch-up that's needed, and just get any of this stuff done. And you want to get this final painting done before you do any landscaping, because if you don't, they'll be dripping paint all over your landscaping and shrubbery. And one thing I want to make you aware of on the painting is when they paint a window, they are going to get paint on any of the, let's say, the little dividing lights. They'll paint the wood and it gets all over your paint on your glass. That's good. You don't want to tape out your glass so they don't get paint on it. You want that paint to overlap on the glass because it creates a good seal at that point. And the person that's going to do the cleaning, they'll come in and scrape all the windows and scrape the excess paint off. So don't let that bother you or worry you that they got paint all over your glass. After they have finished the drives and walks, you can have and the driveway set up for a good 5 to 7 days. Now is when I will install the garage doors with the openers. So you will have a subcontractor to do the garage door. Now, if you ever buy a kit and do this yourself, be very, very careful because a spring on a garage door could cut you in half. I'd rather you not fool with this. You will deal with a subcontractor and you will deal with a garage door, and they'll install the garage door with the openers. And you can choose any style, design, just do a little research on the garage doors. There's quite a variation depending on how much money you're willing to spend. But on the openers, you want to have at least a quarter-inch horsepower, You want to have at least a 1/4 horsepower motor for a single door and at least a 1/3 horsepower motor for a double door. And there's a certain number of little bells and whistles that you can get with the garage doors, and you can just see what's available and then make a decision on how much money you want to spend. You are now ready to go ahead and install your irrigation system and your landscaping if you're going to have an irrigation system. Now on the irrigation system, a lot of times the landscaper will do this portion of it, or they have someone that they always work with that they'll get to bid on the irrigation portion. In our program, I can't remember if I've already told you, but at 24/7, you're going to see information about contacting Rainbird, which is a major supplier of irrigation products. And what you can do is you can send your drawings to Rainbird, and they will design the irrigation system for your home. And I really like this because they're going to do a real professional job. And it gives me something I can give to an irrigation subcontractor so they can bid on it, and we're comparing apples with apples. Because if you get 3 separate bids from 3 separate irrigation subs, all 3 of them could design the system totally different, and that will affect the price. By having Rainbird do the layout for your home, this way you are going to have a design you can give to the irrigation subs, and everybody's comparing apples with apples and bidding on the same thing. On the landscaping, hopefully you have a landscape plan that you're able to give to different landscapers, And that way everybody is bidding on the same thing. And when you get a landscape plan, the landscape architect is going to list the quantities and sizes of the plants and trees that they're recommending for your property. Now, if you want to, if it's your own home, if you want to just go in and throw down some, if you want the landscaper to get in there and level everything up with their tractors, throw down some fertilizer, grass seed, and straw, and you do the bulk of the landscaping later, you can go ahead and do that, and it's only going to cost like $500 or $600, and you can go ahead and do the landscaping later if that's what you want to do. However, if you ever get in the business of selling homes, never, never, never skimp on the landscaping. This is the first impression item anybody sees on a home. You can take an ugly home by design and make it look beautiful with the landscaping. I would cut things out of the home before I would cut the landscaping. I consider this one of the most important parts in being able to market and sell a home. But as I told you earlier, you got to give the landscape architect a budget, and go back and review what I said about the landscape architect, why I highly stress you use one, because you don't want to see PERE if you can't afford it. Now, you could ask for PERE and they can show it to you, and what you could do if it's your own home is install PERE in phases. You can do, just different phases as it fits your budget. And then you could wind up and have PERE. But I've seen some landscaping jobs cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, you can go from A to Z with this kind of stuff. And another thing the landscape architect can do is you can tell them, hey, I'm on a tight budget. Tell me how I can get this to look good. And what they can do is give you smaller caliber trees that they know will grow pretty fast. And there's a lot of things they can do to kind of trim things back so you still get a quality job, and it's going to grow out pretty quick, and you're going to have a beautiful, beautiful yard. So you can talk with the landscape architect, but once you get the final drawing that you've decided, now you can give this to different landscapers, and everybody's bidding the same thing. You do want to deal with a professional company that has a good reputation, because the thing you don't want is some fly-by-night landscaper come in there and bring in, diseased trees that they bought real cheap, and they're installing them, and then a few months later, they're all dead. And you can also find out from your landscaper, there are certain times of the year that's better than others for planting trees, or even, putting in your grass and installing your sod. And just remember, on any side, just the green side goes up. That's an important thing to remember. After they install the landscaping, you can have your exterminator go out there if you're going to do the bait system, and they will go ahead and encircle the home with this bait system for your termite treatment. They'll give you your letter, we just call it a termite letter, your infestation report, so that you can give this to the lender that you may need on a permanent loan. I now recommend you get an as-built survey, where the surveyor will come out and they will show the location of your drives, decks, turnarounds, and all this kind of stuff on your survey, so you'll have a copy of this and there's no problem. And I think this is very important. I remember one time I got a lot years ago, and there was some trash on this lot, and the individual next door, demanded we get rid of this trash. And I told him we wouldn't really fool with it until we started building a home. Well, he just got bent out of shape, and through the homeowners association, they had someone come out and pick up all the trash and put a lien against the lot. And I thought, good night. Well, just do what you got to do. Well, when we went out there and did a current survey on that property, guess whose nice big deck was over on our land? Now, I didn't make him tear the deck down. I worked out an agreement with him, but I did get the lien released without any problem. So before you start throwing rocks at your neighbors, you better get this as-built survey and make sure all your fences and turnarounds and everything is where it should be, and the as-built survey will show this. And you have now finished the exterior of the home.